Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Today's episode is part 2 in our adventure with Rwanda, and I have the lead character, better known as Papa Kazungu, but we all know him as Jimmy Lakey. Jimmy, how are you?
How are you, Dr. Mitch?
You know, I've been looking forward to this podcast for a whole lot of reasons. I've had you on the show before. You're a big personality, both on air, but a big personality in person. I'm going to strip you from all that shit. We're going to get down real to this because I do a lot of extra thinking at night when most people are sleeping. And you're a conservative talk radio show host. Very good. Probably one of the best voices I've ever heard in my entire life. And I'm not even kidding. I've said that before. It's not a joke. But there's something about this story that completely goes against the world we live in today. And we're going to get this entire story from you. And I told producer Chad, I'm going to go a long time, and he's going to have to cut a bunch of shit out, whatever he's got to do. But this is a story that touches me in so many ways. Obviously, you know, producer Chad is very, very creative with his videography. And he brought back some footage from Rwanda as he was on this trip with you guys. I watched it, got emotional. On the first episode, part 1, we talked a little bit about opportunity versus entitlement. And but I want to get it straight from the horse's mouth. Just called you a horse, by the way. But this story means so much for me. One, being just a conservative talk show radio host, people obviously think a whole lot of wrong things about you. And I want to get down kind of to that meat and potatoes, if you will, and however much you want to share with us, I'd be appreciative of it. So welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on again. And tell me a little bit about how the entire process of you adopting a child from Rwanda.
Got invited to lead a college ministry group from a church as a chaperone in Rwanda to lead them on a missions trip. And I said yes to it. And we had always said we'd adopt at the time I was married. We had always said we'd adopt. And I said, well, let's adopt on this trip. And so went through the process with my friend in Africa, Willie, and I said, I want to find me a child, and led the group. And he sent me photos of River and other children. River's the chosen one, and that's how the adoption began. We'd always said we'd adopt, and we ended up adopting, and it came out. It was from Rwanda, and River's the kid that made the cut.
Why Rwanda though?
It was just an opportunity. It was at that moment, got asked to lead a trip, and you know, I just, let's adopt. It just felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, so it was something that was inside you.
Inside me, yeah. And Rwanda's just, open door. I think this is it.
All right, so you get these pictures, you get to Rwanda, then what?
Go through the process of adoption. You're fighting adoption on 2 fronts. You're doing the American side for the immigration and approval for an international adoption. And then on the Rwandan side, you're getting through their court system and their system. Rwanda at the time did not recognize agencies. So there's no adoption agency that you could just pick up the phone and call and then write big checks and suddenly they give you your papers, you book a flight, and you go pick up a child. That happens in other countries. It didn't happen in Rwanda. So I had to find private attorneys there, navigate the system, figure out the protocols there because they didn't recognize any agency. So it was all what we call private adoption, direct with the government. Ran across a couple of hitches. One of the hitches was in their law, they just give you the process. But once started the process with River, they said, you can't adopt from that orphanage. And I said, that's not in the law. Didn't matter. It's what they said. They wanted you to go to the Catholic orphanage. And every child outside of River that we have found that left Rwanda during the year when they were doing the adoptions, all left from the Catholic orphanage. River's the only kid that ever got out of the non-Catholic orphanage. And the reason they did the Catholic orphanage is they figured those kids had better background checks. They knew a little bit more history about them because they wanted to just make sure they were legitimately orphaned and just they wanted to know the backstory, and they just felt that they didn't. So they said, and when you get your U.S. paperwork for adoption, the U.S. doesn't want to break up a sibling group on an international adoption. And so you're approved for, I think, 3 children. And so when I learned that, I went to the orphanage where River was at, and I said, I'll also take this one and this one, and here's my backups.
Right.
And the government of Rwanda says, Oh, no. You can't adopt at all, let alone 3 from this orphanage. And they said, but gee, I make up my accent. It's basically, Jimmy, if you go to the Catholic orphanage, pick any 3 you want and we're done. And I said, no, I'm not leaving this kid behind. I'm not going to do it. And so.
Because you had seen pictures of him.
And I'd met him. Yeah, no, that was my kid.
Pardon me for my ignorance, but I gotta ask the question, right? Because it's all about truth talks. Is there any point in time where race did become a thing? Like, the country we live in today, right? You're going down there, you're a white guy adopting a black son. Well, if you get to do that. Was that any part of the thought process?
No, the process was they were just stubborn about this orphanage. There were a lot of friends. I met some friends along the way that had no trouble picking a child from another orphanage, the one they wanted me to go to. It was really, the real problem was they wanted me to do what they wanted. But I said, no, I had my eyes set on this kid, and doggone it, I was going to get that kid. So that there was never, while I was going through this process, there were other people going through their process and in and out, ready to go. And so they were approving adoptions. They just weren't approving mine.
And so how did you get skirt around that?
Persistence. My friend calls me, Willie, my main guy in Rwanda, he calls me the charismatic fighter. He says, you have so much energy and you fight. And he says, I never want to be you to be mad at me. You will fight. And I laughed because I couldn't get the signature I wanted. I had all the signatures, and I needed a cabinet level officer called the Minister of Gender and Family. And she had to sign off on the final signature. Everything I'd paid for investigations to get the background they wanted, police reports of when he was abandoned. Everything was in line. So I just needed a signature. She wouldn't sign it. Matter of fact, I couldn't even get to the lady. There was a lady named Veronica that was the gatekeeper. She was the assistant. And didn't even know, they knew the cause. We couldn't get past the gatekeeper. And I'd come back home from our first trip over there, and I would call every week, and my friend Willie would say, Jimmy, I don't have any news for you. Eventually he tells the story. He hated when I called. He said, oh God, it's Jimmy again. And I just wouldn't quit. He goes, surely the guy will quit one day. And he said, I'm not quitting. And so finally I went back over, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. It had been now a year. And in Rwanda, he was adopted. They wouldn't sign for him to leave the country. So they gave me the alternative. They said, you can move to Rwanda and live here by our laws for a year and a half. And then at that point, you can take your adopted child out and get your own passport, because that signature would allow us to get a passport. And I said, well, it's not really in my plans to move to Rwanda right now in my life. It now is, but not then it wasn't. And the process just continued, a battle. And finally, because of our first trip over there, I had met a guy named Dr. Mitch, who was equivalent to their Secretary of State. And he was, so at the time it was the George W. Bush administration. He was the compatriot of like Condoleezza Rice. He's high up in the government. And I got to meet him. And I'm in this battle in this second trip over to Rwanda. I've already made a promise. I'm going to take care of the kids at the orphanage. But the reality was, on this trip, I either needed to unadopt him in Rwanda and just take care of him from afar, or I needed to finish this adoption. And I had a photographer with me and everybody left, and I'm in the country by myself. I'm like, I'm going to stay a couple more weeks, and I'm going to keep fighting. And I was at a hotel one day, and I looked up, and I did my first presentation at the orphanage, and the national television showed up, all these cameras, 4 or 5 cameras were there, because it was kind of unheard of for a Kazungu, a white guy, to show up and do what we were doing. So we made the news. It was national news that night. And the next day, I saw Dr. Mitch, who I'd met a year before, Secretary of State equivalent, and third in line to the presidency. I saw him at a hotel, and he remembered me. And I walked up and I said, Dr. Mitch, I have a problem. And I mentioned my problem. He goes, oh, and he's very soft-spoken. And he says, okay, let me see how I can help you. That's all. I whispered almost. And he says, thank you. And he shook my hand and walked away. And I think it was that night or the night before, he told me, he says, I saw you on the television. Thank you. And I told him my problem. And he says, I will see what I can do. Whispered it to me. I'm like, is he shy? I don't know. He was just very quiet, soft-spoken man. And the next day I showed up at the Ministry of Gender and Family, And what I'd been doing for 2-3 weeks now, I would show up there about 10 in the morning, ask to speak to the minister, and Veronica would look at me and say, I will see. And I would sit down, and I sat in a chair, and I'd stare at her for about 3 hours. I would just sit there and stare. My guys would be running errands. Hey, Jimmy, we'll come back and get you in a few hours. Okay, let me know. And I would just sit in the office, and I would stare at her. I felt like, I wish they had like one of the highlights magazines. You just be the dentist. I mean, could I do a crossword or something? There was nothing there. I just sat and stared, checked my phone. I never saw her pick up the phone and say, someone's here to see you, just every day. I did that for probably a week and a half. At least 3 or 4 hours, I'd sit and stare at her. Just wait my turn. The day after I met Dr. Gandhi, I was going to go do my sit-in again, my protest. And I walk in and I sit in the chair. And I said, I'm here to see the minister. She goes, yes. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, here we go again, a standoff. And all of a sudden, this giant door opened from behind Veronica. And it was the minister of gender and family. She says, Mr. Jimmy, I will see you, come in. And boom, just like that, she said, sat down, we talked. I didn't know what her reaction was to me. I saw she had a photo of her and George W. Bush, who had been there a few months ago dedicating the new embassy because he was the president. And I said, do you see? I said, hell, you know the president. I said, I went to both of his inaugurations. She goes, oh, you're friends. And I guess that kind of played in my favor. She goes, oh, you go to inauguration. And she goes, inauguration, raise your hand. And that's it. So we did all that. And she says, Jimmy, come back tomorrow and I will sign the paper. I will have the paper. And I made probably one of those gutsiest, craziest things I ever said. I said, that's not good enough. She says, come back tomorrow, I'll sign the paper. I said, that's not going to work. I said, the baby needs to go home to his family. I said, I need the paper today so we can fly tomorrow. I'm booking tickets. And she says, tomorrow. And I said, today. And I just stared at her like I'd been staring at the other lady. I said, today. And at that point, she probably could have told me to get the heck out of here, you ungrateful son of a gun. But I knew it. Maybe she's not there tomorrow. Then we're delayed again.
Right.
She says, come back after lunch. I will sign your paper. And I told all my guys what I'd done because they said, you told her no, tomorrow's not good enough. I said, I'm a fighter. Let's fight here.
I've been sitting here forever.
So they signed the paper. Yeah, we picked him up the next morning, we picked him up and I picked him up. I was there all by myself. Everybody that I traveled with was gone. It was just him and I.
Now tell me, how old was River then?
When I first saw his first photo, he was about 2.5. He was about 3.5 when we left the country.
Okay. So I want to backtrack just a little bit. So in this trip that producer Chad was in and documenting, River was dropped off at the house, literally in the ditch.
He was put in a ditch in a rainstorm at about 11 o'clock, 11 to 1 in the morning, or middle of the night.
And who were these people, and are you still in contact with them?
Yes, we saw them this trip. The lady who actually found him, Tasiri Ajide was her name. She passed away. She was just a notable woman in that community where she lived, for Rwanda, it's in a very nice house. And her family says that's probably why someone took the kid there. They don't know what the situation was, but baby got dropped off and the scab of the umbilical cord was still there. So relatively a newborn, it's pretty early.
And she wanted him.
She wanted to keep him, and her family all said, Mama, you're an old woman. You cannot. And she decided, so she chose an orphanage. She chose an orphanage and put him pretty far away from her house. And her logic for that was, I want to put him there because if by chance someone who abandoned him and is watching and wants to kind of come back and claim him one day, I don't want them to know where he's at. They might have it wasn't like they brought him to my doorstep and said, could you take care of him? No. So she took him pretty far away to another sector, to an orphanage. And she told her children, she says, okay, I cannot take care of a baby, but if he gets to school age, I'm bringing him back and he's going to school from my house. And so her children were like, okay, Mama. And so River went back. We left there he and I left there when he was just 3.5. And he went back in about 3rd grade, and Tasiri had passed away. So she never got to see him again, but we stayed in touch with her children throughout the years, and very, very great family.
And then there was another lady that was very influential to River.
Tabo.
Yes.
She was one of the caretakers of the orphanage, as opposed to Tasiri and her family, very well-off family, more well-to-do. Tabo is just a local lady in the neighborhood, lives in a pretty much a stucco mud hut, dirt floor, and she was just hired at the time to take care of him in the orphanage. And she tells the stories. I've talked to her 3 times now since he left, that when he was dropped off, he became very sick. She thought he would die. And she said she would always pray. She says, God, if you are listening, if there is a God, you do not let my baby die. And so sure enough, she said, now I knew there was a God. So, and every time River goes back to see her, she just gets so excited because she knew him.
You know, I actually already knew that this podcast, there's a faith base to this. I mean, obviously, right? Like everything had to happen perfectly to be there.
Yeah.
I got to go down this road though. Like you got this white guy coming into this place to adopt. Was there any issue that you had with that?
No, the white guy going in.
They didn't care who adopted these kids as long as they got adopted.
Yeah. Now, since then, they closed the adoption process in Rwanda, and they realized, and I can see their point. They said we're sending our problems to have someone else solve them. And as a culture, this is why Rwanda is such a great country today, and such on the incline. They've literally run almost a PSA campaign saying, "Stop waiting for white people to come solve your problem. We have children in orphanages. We have to start adopting them. We have to take care of them." And that's when they shut down. River's the last one that we know of that got a signature on the line. They closed it after that. I'm talking about Divine. He was the only one from a specific orphanage, and then he's the only one that he's the last one, the signature. He wasn't the last one to leave. Some kids were still waiting for people to book their flights, but he was the last one to get the signature.
And then you kind of parlay that into now there's this thing called River's Promise.
Yeah.
Now we're going to really get in it. We're going to hit on that hard at the end. But there's no way I'm letting you out of this seat, right? Because producer Chad was telling me.
I'm chained down, I think.
You're chained down, man. But producer Chad was telling me what it's like when you come in to Rwanda. And that's impressive, man. And I know it's hard to sit there and talk about yourself. I get it. But I really need you to. And the reason I need you to, because you're making one of the biggest differences probably that's ever out there. We had talked about, and I even admitted in part 1, that I always feel like we need to take care of people here first.
Sure.
And producer Chad kind of changed my mind a little bit on that. It was about the opportunity versus just giving people money. I even asked him in part 1, I said, you know, I love the story of that lady that took him out and played with him and stuff, you know, and I know they don't make any money. What could we send the money? And then that's when we got into this money conversation where you can't send the money because it can cause potential issues. So this is a faith-based thing for River. At least it is for me and how I view his story. But when you go into Rwanda, why are you Papa Kazungu?
Papa Kazungu. Well, when I first started going, I was just Jimmy. The kids called me Jimmy. But once I became River's dad, I'd go to the orphanage and they would call me Jimmy, and all the kids in the orphanage were still there. They'd get in trouble. He is not Jimmy, he is a Papa now, because I had legitimacy. And so they said, he is Kazungu's dad. He is now Papa Kazungu. And so that's where they came from, because the kids, once I had River, were no longer, not by my rules, but by the orphan culture rules, they were no longer able to call me Jimmy. They always called me Jimmy. And they were told no. So Papa Kazungu became my name.
And why do they treasure you so much?
Well, we've done a lot of stuff over there. We closed the orphanage up. There are 50 or 60 kids in the orphanage. We were the first ones to partner with the Rwandan government and a group out of London for what they call the deinstitutionalization. This was where they're trying to say, hey, kids should not be lived in institutions. They should not live their life there. Let's bring them in. Let's find adoptive homes. And they really retrained their whole culture. And we helped find all those kids' homes. And some of the people, we'd find family members that had dropped a kid at the orphanage because we want to do the research. Who are they? And this family said, that's my great niece, but I can't afford another mouth at the table, let alone to send her to school. And so my organization, or River's Promise, we would come in and I said, I'll send her to school for 2 years. And this other organization would say, we're going to come in and teach your family how to do subsistence farming or some other way to pay the bills. And we would partner with that family for 2 years or a year, or whatever we needed. And we would get that kid back into a real family situation. And we partnered with another organization until his orphanage was shut down. I don't think there's no substantial orphanages in Rwanda now. The whole country has absorbed the children into homes that were of that age. And then you get out of the village, These were kids that were naked, literally naked. I'm not making that up. These are people that are still, we got a hunger issue out there. We've got a housing issue out there, but we've still changed their lives. We've sent them to school. These are kids that would never have gone to school if it weren't for us. And, we could, we could do feeding program. We did that during COVID. We could start feeding people, but long-term solution, that's not a long-term solution. That's a Band-Aid. I could start building houses immediately. We built probably 20-something houses over there for widows and orphans. We can do that, but that's a Band-Aid. You've got to make long-term change, and long-term change comes by, I've got to get kids in school. I've got to teach, education. Older kids have to go to trade school so that they can then buy their own food and they can build their own house. Because if I just start throwing food trucks around and houses, I have not affected long-term change. I put a Band-Aid on a nasty wound.
But why you got your kid? You're on a plane. You're going home. Why?
I made a promise to him. I looked at the photos, and I'm the last guy in the world. I mean, I didn't know where Rwanda was at on the map, to be honest. I grew up in church, but whenever you had somebody from Africa come talk at church, you only wanted to see it because there was a slideshow usually or something. It was the most boring stuff ever. That was the missionary thing. And I didn't know where. It was not on my radar screen. But something hit me when I was there, and I said, one day he's going to look, and he's going to go, Daddy, what happened to all, these were kids he grew up with. What happened to him? What happened to Quisera? What happened to Mose? What happened to Musa? What happened to, he was going to ask me, and I knew all their names. And I was like, I never, ever, ever want him to say, Daddy, what happened to them? And I go, I don't know, kid. We got the heck out of Dodge.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to take care of his friends. I'm going to take care of him. And it's simply started. It's just called Jimmy's Orphan Project, honestly. And I just committed, and people heard I was adopting, and people would say, River's going to be part of our community. We'll help you. We'll help you. And one of my friends said, you got to stop calling this Jimmy's Orphan Project. I said, I think it's kind of sexy that way. He said, it's a horrible name. I said, well, I just made a promise to my son. It's my project. He goes, no, it's your son's promise. I went, oh, that's good. River's promise. And that's where it became. But it was a simple thing. I did not want him to ever look at his earliest photos and me with all these kids surrounding me and jumping on me in the orphanage, and him go, what happened to them, Dad? And I go, I don't know, but here we live in Colorado in the suburbs, and aren't we good?
I know. That's what impacts me, right?
Yeah.
Is one guy making that big of a difference, which definitely goes to show that we could do so much more if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Right. So you made this promise. Obviously, you're fulfilling on this promise, like bigger than I've ever seen. Again, humble. I get it. You happen to know some people with some money.
Yeah.
Making
well, by the way, let me tell you, I thought I was done with the promise. Thought I was over. I closed the orphanage up. The kids would all, when they got placed into their adoptive homes, that'd get requests. My guys would contact, when are you coming over? They don't want to go to their foster home. Oh, this is funny. Dad laughed. I'm like, all of them? I said, can we do it all on one day? Every kid that left that orphanage wanted me to come and they had a ceremony and hand them over and shake them hands and walk to the car. They all wanted me. I'm like, there's 50 kids. Could we do this in groups? And so several of them I made it. I'd go back over and I'm staying in the orphanage until Papa comes. Okay. And they're not going. They're budged. It's like a protest. So the orphanage closed. I thought I was done. I said, kept my promise. And my guys in Rwanda, God bless them. I said, Jimmy, you fly out today. You go to the airport. I said, good. I said, I'll rest around the hotel. They said, I want to take you to show you something. And I said, this sounds like a setup to me. I know these guys. And they said, no, we want to show you. So they drove me about 45 minutes out of the city, showed me a place, all the legend and lure right off the highway. You walk about a mile in, and all of them say there's never been a white guy this far off the road up here. It was a part of Rwanda that has what they call the Twa. Most people call them pygmies, so a lot of them are shorter, not all of them, but it was just kind of a different tribal section, but very poor, extreme poverty, worse than the rest of Rwanda. It's the most extreme poverty you'll find there. And they took me to women's houses where, like, is this a house or is this it's a pile of banana leaves? No, she lives under there. Oh, shoot. And I'm the first white guy. So I'm driving back to Kigali. I see this horrible scene. And I said, Willie, why did you show me this? He goes, I need you to think about it. And I said, need me to think about it? I'm going to have nightmares about this. And I was thinking, I said, you know what I just saw? It's like driving down a country road at night and you see a car get T-boned by the freight train. And yet you got to get home to Thanksgiving dinner. You know there's not another car behind you to stop. You got to stop. And so I saw the car get T-boned. I'm out in this village. I'm like, it's been decades, hundreds of years since a white guy's been up this far. Ain't nobody else stopping.
Yeah.
Well, shoot. Here I am, I guess, challenge accepted. And so all of our sponsors that were at the orphanage, I was telling them, your sponsorship is done. And I'm calling them up going, hey, you know that sponsorship? I got a new kid for you. Really? Yes, I'm going to keep charging your credit card. And because I knew no one else was going to stop, no one would be there because no one had ever been there.
So how do you feel when you step on that ground there and you see all the things you've accomplished?
Oh, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Sometimes I pinch myself going, did we really do this? I mean, weird people, the kids will write letters back and to their sponsors. And they say, thank you for being my sponsor. Jimmy came and he brought food. Jimmy did this. Jimmy came, he's building us a new school. Jimmy. And it kind of makes me feel weird. I'm like, I did, but it was with a lot of good sponsors, a lot of great donors. And so I feel great that what we have done, and I'm not trying to be overly humble, I'm just one little dude that happened to run across some great people, generous people, some, our average donation for years was $25 to $35. So there's our average donation. We did a lot of stuff just off a little bit of money. So it feels great.
I'm not letting you off the hook.
I know you're not.
I'm not letting you off the hook. You walk out there and you see that stuff. Set aside the people that you know who helped you.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you look and you see that?
Oh, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. You just stand. I stood watching this school go up. We're only phase one. I mean, we're building. It looks like a Vegas casino in the middle of nowhere. It's going to be, once we get electricity tied into that thing, it's amazing. I mean, you can't help but say, walking up with my son in the last visit, I leaned over to him a couple of times and said, what do you think? He goes, wow. So, I mean, it's just incredible. You pinch yourself and go, is this real? How did we get here? And last year we figured up, I've been working on this stuff for 15 years. 15 years I've been doing this. And suddenly you have this. It's just absolutely incredible. Is this real? That's what I feel. I feel, is this real?
Video, pictures, it all tells a story. So, I'll talk a little bit about River. Super good looking kid, stout, obviously getting ready to play D1 football. And I get to thinking about different things a lot. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? He could have still been there, one of them.
Yeah.
And I know he's a young man. And I know it's going to hit him at some time because you know how we get old and all of a sudden we're like, son of a bitch, let me look back at this life. What the hell happened? I can see your love for him and his friends. I mean, it's almost like you take it. It's like you didn't stop at the village there. You got a whole village in Colorado of all his friends. You are a sucker, man.
I'm a sucker.
But you're an amazing human being. Do you feel, or maybe, this is a father-son conversation you don't want to repeat on the show, but you ever talk about it?
No, he knows. I mean, we were in Rwanda this past 2 weeks ago now. So whenever you're watching this, not 2 weeks ago, the last time in Rwanda, we were at the place with the family that had found him, and mom had passed away to Syria GA, but these are the family, and we're there, and they're kind of telling stories of what they remember. Important for him to hear because now he's a young man. It's the first time he's been there. Last time he was middle school, early high school. Now he's about to go to college. And they're telling the story, and somebody asked River, and I kind of feel bad when he gets put on the spot. I'm like, good luck, son.
Which, by the way, River, you're going to be put on the spot here on part 3.
Yeah. So he's going to be put on the spot. They said, River, when you see all this and you hear all these tales and all these people are here and they spent their hard-earned money to come here and help your dad do River's promising, what does it make you feel? And he said, and so he gets it. He said, I'm just amazed that one thing sparked all this. So he knows, boom, he was born, he was abandoned, and out of that grew all this. And those were his words. He says, I'm just amazed at how one thing sparked all this. And that's really, it was what do they call it? The domino effect, the butterfly effect. But one thing that you would think is a horrible situation, it is a child abandoned. But because it happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened.
It's actually wickedly powerful.
Yeah.
Because I have this whole thing that a segment that I do called "It Had to Happen," and that actually had to happen. Is that God's doing? Is it whatever? Yeah, I mean, I believe it is.
I believe it is.
It absolutely had to happen that way. But what's interesting about that, it had to happen. Why did it have to happen to you?
I have no clue, but it's great. I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, this is it. I thought I'd, going to law school. I was going to be a famous talk radio guy. I was going to make a bazillion amount, all the plans I had. And then this one's just like, boom, no, this is kind of more important. And I'm like, okay. And, there wasn't a moment that I said, okay, yes, it's just every step, every way. I'm like, the Bible says if somebody wants to go to the Bible, the steps of the righteous are ordered of God. And I just one step in front of the other. Not that there's perfection along the way, but just take one step at a time and go, adoption, it worked. Promise, it worked. Everything, I'm leaving, I'm done. Here's the village. I'm like, well, if the door's opening, I'm just going to keep going through. I'm just silly like that, I guess.
All right, tough guy. So here comes something.
You're trying to get me. I know you.
No, here it comes, tough guy. You've had this amazing relationship with your son.
Yeah.
That started out as, from a ditch to where it's at now. Well, let's be real here. He's leaving.
Yeah.
He's going to school.
Yeah, you're trying to get me, aren't you?
Yes, I am. What does that mean for you?
First of all, it's incredible. I mean, you think the story of a kid found in a ditch in a rainstorm, middle of the night, the journey, the path that was meant for him, and the kid's going off scholarship to play Division I football. Incredible. I mean, and to be a part of that is fantastic. My house is going to be really lonely, so I'll be calling up you and coming over and, Mitch,
having some Sprite and Coke.
You want to have a hangout? That's Sprite and Coke, I'm sure. Yeah, you want to hang out, Mitch? You want to cuddle? I don't know what it's going to be. But it's also going to be kind of fun for me in the fact that I'll go watch him play football, but there's going to be a lot more trips to Rwanda. There's going to be a heck of a lot more travel. I got business to do now, and a lot of my time, effort, and energy I've spent raising a kid and in some sense raising all of his friends, I feel like, and coaching football. But now he's there, and I'm going to deal with my loneliness by probably traveling a lot more and hopefully developing good habits. Well, not drinking too much.
He just turned out to be a phenomenal kid. And we all know that kids don't become phenomenal kids without phenomenal parenting. So obviously this is where you were meant to be. It was the way you were touched, it's the way you are, it's the who you are. And I did often wonder about that. When he leaves, what is that visceral feeling? And I'm sure that's going to be an interesting conversation for you. And I'm sure he'll be back and forth, but it's still different.
It's going to be totally different, and I'm sure he's going to continue to do what he does now. Hey, Dad, can you Venmo me? And it's like, dude, you really still? And I'm sure that's going to happen forever. So he knows where the bread is buttered, and I'm sure he's going to be coming back to the butter.
As they all do.
Yeah.
As they all do. So we'll hit River's promise. We got the perception and the story that you made him a promise you weren't going to leave anybody behind. And we know now that that's going to continue. And again, a guy like me, where I always thought, let's take care of ours first. I've never seen that big a difference being made by one person who then got a community together to solve these problems. We talked a little bit on part one about the desk, how important just those desks are. And producer Chad was talking about that desk represents one more butt inside a seat, which gives them opportunity versus entitlement. Talk to me a little bit about how River's Promise gives that opportunity versus entitlement.
Well, you're right. A lot of folks I've had friends and family say, well, why don't we take care of our kids first or here first, which is great. Do that. If that wasn't the path that opened for me. I wasn't supposed to. I mean, I can think of a few causes I'd be very passionate about if here, but that wasn't my thing. But I have to always tell people, find your thing. I tell this to my listeners on the radio. I said, I'll tell you about my charity all day long, and I'll ask you to sponsor a kid, or I'll ask you to help build a school. But if that's not your thing, it's not your thing. But did you do something for the rescue mission? Did you do something for the Little Sister Carmen Food Bank? Did you give to the church? Did you do something, or did you just say, that's not my thing? Well, what is your thing? Find your thing and go do that. And your thing may not be my thing, and my thing may not be your thing, but we all can have a thing. And if you just kind of figure it out because we're put on the planet to do something. And that ticks me off when people don't. They go, well, let's take care of ours first. They're good. What are you doing? There's foster kids care system in our country is broken. A kid can get kicked out of foster care at 18. The senior year of high school doesn't matter. You're on the streets. You're out of here. That's a broken system. Someone step up and fix it. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. Then what is your thing? You're going to make a difference at it.
But your thing, every dollar goes to the thing.
Yeah, that's what we do. And the desk thing is kind of funny. The desk kind of was an accident. We have a sponsorship, right? We send kids to existing schools. And we're going to, as we build our school, give them a better education. Our school's different because we'll actually feed the kids. A lot of these kids don't eat. And if they do eat, it's at our school. So, and it's a better education. We teach in English. That's a ticket to the future in Rwanda. Lots of reasons why we're building our own school. So we're taking our existing sponsorship dollar and now funding our school, hiring our teachers, our assistants, and just it goes to us. But we never thought about it in the beginning. Oh, these schools that we're sending, they already had the capital for, they already bought their desk. Oh, yeah, they already bought their shelves. Oh, shoot. And I've got some generous donors that have said, as long as you can get butts and seats, we'll keep building all the way through high school. They're ready to build. We've already bought the land for the high school, the secondary school. We bought land for teacher housing. And their commitment, as long as you fill it up, we'll just keep going. So my job's to fill it up. And I'm like, oh, we got a third grade class. And I'm like, oh, that just pays the teacher. We got to put the desk in the rooms too. So kind of stumbled across that one, but we didn't want to raise the sponsorship fee to cover a one-time purchase of a desk that'll last for 20 years. So
where does this go from here? Is this your passion? Is this something that you're going to continue on?
Oh, heck yes. As my son moves out more and more, my guys over there keep saying, how many times are you going to be here? And I said, we'll see. We'll see how that works out. No, this is it. And the goal is, and we'll see what it looks like in the future. We're trying to build an organization that goes beyond me. There's the old saying, there's no success without a successor. And I think my son has an inkling to somehow pick it up and take it and run with it. And we'll see how that works. And we're so small, but we're building a cool board of directors and kind of putting it all together. So I hope this thing lives well beyond me in 50 years. And yeah, I'll be gone in 50 years. No, I might still be here. I'm going to be hanging on. Maybe 70 years I'm going to be out of here.
That's going to look ugly in 50 years, but yeah, as long as you're hanging on.
If you can look this good at this age now, can you imagine how good I'll look in another 50? It's going to be fantastic.
I tell you, this story has touched me a lot. And it's like everything else in life. And the reason we run Story on True Talks is because once you get the actual story, it changes your perception, it changes your chemistry to everything. And I've said this before. I really value you as a friendship. The first time I met you, and you were just a guy that I'm like, man, I just really like this dude, right? And then I hear all this stuff, and I'm like, holy crap, where am I falling short, man? Like I got no plan. I'm just trying to get my kids through high school, right? But this is gigantic. You've done something absolutely gigantic, bigger than any single individual that I know that's done anything. And I know some people with some big bucks, and I am going to really help you with this. I'm going to get a hold of a lot of the people that I know has got big money. This is something that, producer Chad brought me into this and told me about it, and in meeting you. And there's just something special about a kid in a ditch that we end up at this level. Yeah. I mean, that's faith-based, man. There's something there.
That's what we call a good old-fashioned miracle.
That's a good old-fashioned miracle.
Right, that's a tent revival, wave your hanky meeting. I don't know, play something like that. That's just a miracle, and you can't orchestrate it. And we can get a lot of mission creep and stuff, but education's so key. You're like me. I've got my son. He's every blessing in the world has befallen. I'm like, dude, could you get your homework in on time? Do you even go to school? But in Rwanda, I've said this, and this is how we started it. Education is the ladder that a kid can use to climb from the pit of extreme poverty. And we've got to give them that ladder so they can get themselves out of that pit, because if not, feeding program, there's never anything. And education in America isn't that way. You're hoping your kids will go to school and get a piece of paper to hang on the wall, and maybe go to college and get another piece of. They don't have to climb from extreme poverty. You hope they do better than you do. Yeah. But they're not. It doesn't mean the same. It doesn't have the same thing. This is life or death. These kids live or die. They live their entire life in poverty. They spawn another generation in extreme poverty if we don't give them that ladder. So it's a huge deal that we focus on it. Not that, we want all of our kids in America to have a great education. I want the inner city schools to be fixed. Our public education system is broken. Don't get the talk show host in me going. But in the grand scheme of things, a lot of our woes are self-inflicted by bad elections and not knowing who's on our school board. A lot of the problems we have with our education system, we brought on ourselves because we weren't engaged.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay.
Now you're going to get the host of this.
All right, good. Let's go.
Here's where I disagree with that. I disagree that anybody has the same passion as Jimmy. I think if they did, the system wouldn't be broken.
No.
When you took your passion in there to change that, you changed that.
Yeah.
We throw more money at that here than anywhere else, and we don't change shit. You didn't have any money, or you didn't have the kind of money that it took to make you do what you've done there, and you found a way.
Yeah.
So that's my disagreement with that.
I don't see any disagreement there. I was hoping a real fight.
Well, I never fight with a conservative talk show radio. Dude, I'm smarter than that. You've been doing it for a lot longer than I have. You crush me.
Well, when I say we self-inflicted, I mean, we want to complain about our schools, right? We want to complain about schools. Do we even know who's on the school board?
Right.
Do we know who's on the State Board of Education? No. Then stop complaining about it's self-inflicted. That's what I mean by that self-inflicted part.
No, I agree. And I mean, the other thing that kind of hit me, and it's just part of the story, is we were talking about Willie. Is that the same Willie that just texted you?
Yes.
And Rivers Howell?
Rivers 18.
Yeah, so you've maintained an 18-year relationship with this guy.
I've known Willie 20 years. Willie's my main contact over there. Willie's the guy who helped me facilitate the adoption. Willie studied in Colorado. That's how we knew each other. So, but I've got so many friendships over there. I show up at the hotel. All the waiters know me. Hotels I've stayed at and haven't stayed at. When they hear I'm in town, they'll text me and say, "Hey, I want to come see you," and they'll come see me. Meet you at the lobby. Here I come, and it's like a family reunion over there.
But what that means is you've made an impact. You made a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm excited as all get out to talk to River. And I've met him a few times, and for whatever reason, all I can think about is this little guy in the ditch, and you just want to hug him. Of course, I got to look up, and he's big and thick and stuff. But I think about stuff like that a lot, right? And I hope he does go on to do something around that area, because I too many times I think we don't know why we're on this planet. I think we just survive every day, and guys like you inspire me, man, like big time. I don't even know how to tell you how much that you inspire me by having a vision, having a goal, and then following it all the way through to a damn school. That's amazing, man. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing.
It's what was meant to be. And that's where I'm just like, people say, "How'd you get into it?" I said, "I don't know how I get into it. So I'm guessing there's no way out of it."
That's what I was going to ask you. Is there a way out for you now?
Well, they would say, "How do you get into it?" Or you ever well, I don't know how I got in. So I guess I get out. I just keep going.
Jimmy Lakey, you are a phenomenal human being, my friend. And I know that you would never say it, and all your friends say it.
Could you tell my bosses in radio
I'm going to call them and tell them, because you're a phenomenal human being, and you do phenomenal things. And I know you don't like to take all the credit for it, but you have made a bigger difference in the world than any single human I know.
Thank you.
Congratulations, man. Appreciate
I'll drink
it.
to that. No, I'm out. Thank you, sir.
You bet.